Hi GuavaBees, and welcome to another episode of the Dear GuavaBean podcast. Remember, submit your questions in the sandbox or on the website and we could be answering yours in the next episode. I'm Francesca, and with me as always is Claire.
Hello.
And today's question is from Hannah, who asks, Dear GuavaBean, one of my clients with whom I have a great relationship and enjoy working is super disorganized. He's paying me good money for my services, but in order for me to do my job properly, there are things I need from him, but he never delivers. He keeps saying next week or next month, or that he's about to hire someone to do that. This means I cannot possibly grow his business in the way that I'm being paid to. I have expressed this concern with him and he completely understands and has told me he knows it's his fault and that he's holding me back. Then he tells me again that he will do it next week or next month, or that he's about to hire someone to do that any minute now. The problem is that firstly, I feel uncomfortable taking his money when I can't do my job properly. But it's also making the work a little dull for me because there's no progression or growth. It's just the same every month. What would you do? Okay, so again, I think the more experienced freelancers have probably had this situation, probably at least once, I would say. I know I have. What about you, Claire? Have you been in this situation before?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's very common to work with people who are just busy, disorganized. Not always their fault. They've just got a million things going on. But yeah, I've definitely been in this situation before. I know it's not fun.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've had a client like this too. And I think it can be tricky because, like you say, it's not the client's fault. It's not like they're doing this deliberately. When they hire somebody, they are hoping that that person probably works the same way as they do, and they will just kind of have all that information and just know what to do. And that isn't always the reality. I think sometimes people aren't aware that they're making it difficult. And even if they are, maybe they're not sure on how to change it. For example, my old client was terribly disorganized too. So he would have a shop, a business that he would run, but he would have 3 different price lists that I was to be working from. I had a customer support kind of virtual assistant role. So I didn't know what was going on. Sometimes the prices would be different. He would have maybe already spoken to some customers, and then I would be relaying information which was actually different to what they had been told. So it would just be a communication breakdown for me. So I can relate to Hannah most definitely. And it is a tricky situation to be in. Now, when you were in this situation, Claire, what did you do?
Well, I've been in this situation a few times, and I feel like every time I get into it, I learn a lot more. And I have been learning about what works and what doesn't work with these types of clients. In the beginning, I thought that I just needed to be more clear with them. I just needed to say it more often, or I needed to express it in a different way to make them understand, or I just needed to follow up more often. I just kind of increased my volume and I just asked more often, and that didn't work for sure, because you don't create more time just by asking them to do it. Often it just stresses them out more. They don't want to open your emails. They don't respond back. I noticed that the more I push, the less I got back. I mean, sometimes it works to actually, be very direct, but oftentimes if you're dealing with a client where they have this ongoing problem, it's a habit for them, you're not going to change their habits by asking in a different way. I realized that I had to change the way that I was communicating with them in order to get the kind of results that I wanted. A lot of times it meant slowing things down, only asking for one thing at a time. This is what a project manager that I worked with, she taught me this, and she said, never ask for more than one thing at a time, and wait until you get that thing before you ask for anything else, because people can't remember a million different things. If you send a client a list with 3 or 4 different things that you need from them, you're probably not going to get any of that. But if you send them a list with one thing that you need, there's a much better chance that you actually get that thing. The client has a lot less excuses to avoid it. And so I learned to change my style and my approach, and to take a lot more initiative and to find a way to get the job done, or to work with the resources that I have and just be creative. Honestly, that's how I've learned to deal with it. I've just had to be creative and use what I have and make the most out of the situation. What about you? You said you worked with a previous client who was very disorganized. Do you not work with him anymore?
No, unfortunately I don't. But that wasn't just due to that kind of relationship that we had where it was difficult to get the work done. It was due to something else. But no, we don't work together anymore. It was a very difficult scenario. And I 100% get what you're saying, where just because we see a certain aspect of their business, we can't assume that that is just everything that they're thinking about. They've probably got like 50 other things that they have to think about in their day. So I've often found exactly the same as you said. If you try and just ask for really simple things that kind of move you forward slowly, that's better than bombarding them with something and they're already inundated with things and then they just get confused or annoyed and it doesn't do anything good for the relationship or the working relationship. So I would just echo what you said. I can definitely see why that would work. I often think this kind of thing can be like a communication breakdown. So that's probably just because in my situation I had it where different information was being relayed to different people and it got confusing. So Hannah has said that her client is aware that they're a bit tricky to work with, but there isn't enough communication sometimes as to why that's the case. So often it can be the case of the freelancer to just figure out a way around it. So there are different ways. And like you've said, you've learned a lot from these scenarios. And I think it is a case of kind of learning what works and what doesn't. And that's not always going to be the same because every client is different. So it is just about kind of figuring out how you work with them and just figuring out what you can get done and what is a bit more tricky. What I have done in the past with this particular client myself, and I'm wondering whether it's an opportunity for Hannah to maybe think about and other freelancers who are experiencing the same problem. If there are just areas where the client is not kind of doing their bit or it's not part of your job description, is it a possibility that perhaps you could work with another freelancer and team up with them instead? So the client in this situation has said, okay, I'm going to hire somebody to do these extra bits, and then they never get round to it. Is it a possibility that you could find someone that you know, maybe it's someone you've worked with before, or maybe someone you know in the communities that you hang out with, that could do that work for them? And could you form a team and actually say to your client, here, I have the perfect person. Would you be willing to work with them? And maybe you could almost refer somebody that way. So you're taking it into your hands to go out and find someone who would be perfect to get this aspect of the work done. Sometimes that can be a lot easier than thinking that it's all on your shoulders and trying to sort it out yourself when maybe the client has said that they're going to look for somebody, but they might just be too busy to, or they might not really know where to look. You know, you might have better experience as a freelancer to know who to look for, and that might be a good way of looking at it. I don't know if that's something you've ever done, Claire. You know, that's something I have done myself, and it does work to a certain extent, again, depending on the scenario.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I actually have done that with one client that I'm working with right now in Facebook ads, and she's amazing. Like, I love working with her, but in order to keep the ads fresh, you always need new creative. That means like new copy for the ads, new images, new videos. And so I'm always asking for new creative because if I get new stuff, I can make better ads. And so I understand that and she understands that, but same with this situation. Sometimes people are just busy and I've always gotten the same answer, you know, not right now, maybe next month, maybe next month. And so eventually I said to this client, like, we'll take on your design, we'll do it in-house. Like, we'll find a designer for you. We'll work with them to create the exact images that we need. We'll have a monthly meeting where you get to review everything. And, you know, we'll just take that entire process, that entire job off your hands. And that way it's a win-win for everyone because they're going to have to hire someone to do that anyways. And then they're going to have to manage that person and it's going to be a lot more work for them. And so we found a way to make it work for us because we really needed, like, I needed that new creative. And I knew that I just wasn't going to get it any other way than by, you know, pretty much just doing it myself and taking it over myself. And that meant, you know, finding the right designer, managing the process, setting it up. But now it works great. And I get the stuff that I need. Like you said, I did have to hire another freelancer, like bring them in, collaborate. It is another job that you take on, but sometimes these are the things that you have to do in order to move forward and make it work for you and for the client.
Right. I think it is about weighing up the options, isn't it? And it's going to vary depending on what your situation is. But it's like if you brought on another freelancer, like you've said, it actually ended up making your job not necessarily easier, but more effective, and the work got done, and it made the relationship a lot stronger. And I think that's the case, isn't it? Sometimes it can feel like, okay, if I bring someone in, is it going to be this huge responsibility? Well, yeah, it is a responsibility, but is it worse than carrying on the way you are and actually probably falling out with your client potentially because the work isn't getting done to the standard that you want? So I think it's worth weighing it up and definitely considering it as an option, especially in Hannah's scenario where she has said that the client has repeatedly said, yes, I'm going to hire someone, but it never ends up getting done. I think the problem is, I know we've already touched on this, but clients are so busy. Their businesses, they're running them. A lot of people have more than one business, so they're being pulled in all different directions. So when you're asking something of them to be able to do your job, it can sometimes feel like you're asking for more time and more attention and like you need more from them. And it can feel quite scary to a client, if they've got very little time as it is, and it's going to feel like you're asking more than you really are, But I think that if you just communicate your needs in a way that works, and like you've said, if you actually sit down and you say, okay, we're going to have a meeting every month or week or whatever works for you, and it's in your diary and you know what you're going to talk about, having those sorts of kind of scheduled times to talk will get these things out in the open. And I think it's important as well to set goals. So even if they're tiny goals that you have to work towards together, it's going to make the job a lot easier, and it's going to make you both clear on what you're expecting of each other too. And once you have those goals, then you can find out a way to hit them, and be creative and find different ways around things, like you've already said, Claire. But I think goal setting is a very important part of this too, and to both be clear on what those are. Often I think it is a sort of a communication issue sometimes, isn't it? Where, like we've said already, and this is the case on a lot of different freelancer issues, is that maybe you're just not on the same page, that's all. And you need to actually have a proper conversation where you're setting aside a time to talk about it, rather than just, sort of mentioning it in an email casually and going, oh yeah, we'll do it later. Well, yeah, we'll do this, next week, and then just, it's easier to put it off that way. Whereas if you set time aside, I think it's more likely that you're going to get things done and find a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. If all else fails, and if you've tried many different things and you've expressed your concerns many different ways and things still haven't improved, then I think definitely scheduling a phone call just to talk about this one thing and to find solutions, not just talk about the problem, but prepare some ideas and some solutions that would work for everybody. Sometimes, even though everybody knows that it's an issue, nobody has really taken the time to sit down and put together a plan for how to deal with that issue. And so the client could be very, very appreciative of you taking this time. When I was a new freelancer, I was very hesitant to ask clients to schedule an extra call or to talk about these kind of things. I always felt like I was intruding on their, busy schedule. But realistically, your job is very important too. And in order to do your job well, you need the client to support you. It's a mutual relationship. You support them, they support you. And if the support is not balanced to the point where you feel like it's really making your work dull and it makes you uncomfortable getting paid for this work that you can barely do, then I think it's worth actually trying to have a conversation about it. And if you have that conversation and, it's still nothing changes, at least you know that you did everything in your power to fix the problem and didn't just, deal with it until it became such a big issue that it breaks the working relationship. That's a huge thing, because I've definitely walked away from clients that have just been way too stressful to deal with. I think it's important that no matter which way you decide, if you've tried everything possible, you have to make a decision. Either you stay with this client and you continue to try to make it work and you make the best out of the situation that you have, or you walk away and put your time and energy into another client. because realistically, the ideal clients, like the clients that you want to be working with long-term and growing long-term with, are the clients that support you equally. It really is a relationship, and it's not just one-sided. Even though clients are busy, I've been very fortunate to work with really good clients who are super busy. They have huge businesses, they have huge teams, but they still make time to support me and to ask every now and then, like, is there anything you need? Is there anything I can do to support you better? Those clients exist. And sometimes you have to go through a few rough clients in order to really appreciate and to understand the clients that you really want to work with.
I genuinely think that's so important, and it's something a lot of freelancers, especially new freelancers, overlook. Is it possible that when you're working with a client and you're having these continuous problems, you're coming up against these roadblocks just time and time again, maybe it's worth having a look at it and thinking, does this client actually align with what you had in mind for your freelancing business? Maybe in the beginning they were a client that, were offering quite a good amount of money for work that you were fairly new at. I don't know the scenario. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it's something different. But as time goes on, are they still, like you said, supporting you in the way that you hope and the way that you expect? Because you need to be happy with the clients you're working with. Not every moment in freelancing is going to be wonderful, but overall you should be happy with the clients that you're working with, and you should feel comfortable in those relationships. And sometimes it might just be that what you want from your business has changed, and sometimes that can be why clients that used to be a good fit because your priorities were different maybe aren't such a good fit anymore. And it's 100% you're well within your right to look at these situations and figure out if that's the case or not. I mean, we're not always saying that as soon as something happens that isn't wonderful, that you should drop a client. No, we're not saying that at all, because a lot of the time things can be worked through. It can go from a minor misunderstanding to maybe something a bit bigger you need to work on together, and it can work out actually to be a lot stronger that way. And we've talked about that in past podcasts. But, if it's a continuous problem that you're having and nothing ever seems to be, going right, even if you've tried every avenue, you've tried to talk to them and schedule meetings and set goals, and you've done all the things that we've mentioned and it still isn't working, it might be, if you're super stressed and it's making you anxious about being a freelancer, it could be time to maybe reflect and see whether another client would be a better fit. And that's not a selfish thing to say, because it might seem like it on first glance. You're thinking about yourself and wanting to be happy with your business, but from the client's point of view as well, it might just be that you're not a good fit for them. That does happen sometimes, and they might actually find another freelancer would be a better fit. And that's not just to do with the skills or the experience, but it could be your personality types maybe don't gel, or someone who maybe worked in the industry before might be a better fit. It's a two-way street, really. And you've said this already, it is a relationship. It's not just one-sided. So sometimes it can be a good idea to just see whether that's the avenue you want to take and whether that would be better for both parties. It can definitely be difficult to do that though. So it's again worth weighing up all these other options first. And you've already said this, Claire, but thinking of solutions, not just kind of obsessing over the problem. Because if you obsess over a problem, that doesn't automatically mean it's going to be fixed, does it? You need to think of something which is going to solve the problem. And if that isn't possible, then, it might be time to move on.
Have you ever solved this problem? Have you ever had a client that was super disorganized and you managed to figure it out and come out on the other side?
Yes. I think they weren't okay, so the client I have in mind, they weren't super disorganized. They weren't complete haphazard sort of nightmare or anything, but it was the fact that they had a fairly new business and they had been in the industry, but they'd never run this business before, obviously because it was new, and they didn't really know what systems to use. I think maybe they'd done their own research and sort of settled with a couple of ideas, but they weren't really kind of seamless, so it was creating a lot of extra work. So when I came on board, I have, I've said before, I have lots of different things I've done, but my background is in customer support and actually creating strategies for companies to be able to deal with their customers and make it part of their processes and make it really seamless. So it fits with sales and marketing and aftercare and social media and all this stuff. And they didn't know how to do that. It was really disjointed. So in my scenario, it was a case of communicating that actually there are better options and you don't need to be pulling your hair out and sort of not fully committing to to different apps and platforms and things, which is kind of what they were doing. They were just feeling around and not really knowing what they were doing. And it was about actually creating a strategy. But a lot of that came from communicating that this was a problem, but it could be fixed, and this is how we fix it. And it was working together with them and just figuring out what their needs were, also what their customers wanted, and then building it around that. So again, you know, it was pretty much, to be honest with you, solved in a few phone calls and a lot of obviously work implementing things. But it isn't intentional. You know, clients don't really mean to be a nuisance. It's just sometimes a case of not knowing what to do or what direction to go in. And when you find someone who you can work with who has that knowledge, it makes it a lot easier. And it's all down to just having a talk about it and figuring out what the options are. Like you've said, there's no point kind of talking about the problem without finding a solution. And yeah, I just help the client find a solution, really. That's all it comes down to. But you have to know what the problem is. You know, that's probably another point, is that just because you might know what the problem is in your mind, the client might see it completely differently. They might see a problem in a completely different light. So that's always why it's worth having a conversation as well, because you might be thinking about it completely differently to them. They might see problems or issues that you can't see, and vice versa. So that's why having a conversation is important, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of problems that occur are all down to communication or lack of communication. But even like all the communication in the world isn't going to change some people's habits if they're just way too busy and they're just way overworked. I think for me, I really turned the corner and was able to solve this little puzzle with my clients is when I finally saw that we were on the same side. We're on the same team. We're supposed to be working together to accomplish these goals. And in the past, I had always kind of seen it as me versus them. I was working for them and they needed to give me this so that I could do my job. And it was a very I versus them situation. But when I finally saw it as we are in this together, I'm on your side, I've got your back, we'll figure this out. That is when I was able to really find more solutions, and I was able to communicate in a better way. Because I think in the past, even though I thought I was being, very professional, asking for the things that I needed, a lot of the times I was just coming across, maybe a little bit too harsh or a little bit too demanding or whatever. So when I kind of changed my mindset and I started to approach them and try to find solutions, like you said, always be looking for the solution, always be looking for a way that you can make it easy for them, even if it means, you have to learn a new skill, you have to take on a job that's not really your job in order to get your job done. I've had to learn graphic design and copywriting, things that I don't love to do, I don't really do very well, but sometimes you just need to get it done and, nobody else is there to do it. And so that is really what changed it for me, learning to think we're on the same side and we're working together. And then also just learning to take initiative, to make it easy, and to understand that at the end of the day, clients, they don't want someone that they have to manage all the time. They're hoping to find, a completed package, someone who can just fully get up and running, do their job with minimal work possible. And that's every client's dream. It's not necessarily true. A lot of people need a lot of support and training and help and resources to get their job done. But the more you can be self-reliant, the more you can figure things out, you can solve your own problems, and you can not ask too much out of the client, you'll start to have a better relationship. And that way, when you do need to ask something, there's a bigger chance that you'll actually get it. For me, I don't ask very often. And so when I do ask for something, I try to make it a priority. I make it urgent, and I usually get it because it's only once in a great while, and they know that I'm only asking because it's an emergency and I can't solve it on my own.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a trust thing then in that case. So, when you're working with a client and they can almost feel that resistance where you're, like you said, on separate sides, and you're part of the team, you're working towards the same goal and you're just doing your part of that. Maybe if you just let your guard down as such and just show them that you're helping them, you're not trying to get stuff from them, you're trying to give to them, give them the gift of the stuff they can't do, the gift of time almost, that maybe that would alleviate that feeling of they don't want to kind of let go of some of the things that they're holding on to, that maybe it would be a case of just them being happy to just let you take control of more stuff. Because you just made me think of that when you said, like, they don't want someone to have to manage all the time. Like, if you did, you'd have an employee, wouldn't you? And you'd employ them like you would in a traditional sense. If you're hiring a freelancer, you kind of just want them to get on with it because they're the expert in that little area. Well, for the most part anyway. I know that's not always the case. So maybe it's just that thing of like not willing to let go of those tasks or just that little part of their business. Because, a lot of clients, they feel very personal about their businesses. It's their baby, they don't want to offload a bit onto a stranger because essentially that's what they're doing when they hire a freelancer. So maybe it's just that trust thing. As soon as you kind of show that actually you're there to help them, not to hinder them, then in the same way as you said earlier about asking for too much, you can kind of feel like, well, it's a bit of a hindrance. I don't have a lot of time to give you all this stuff. Then maybe that's just allowing a little bit more free roam as you build that trust, and hopefully that would strengthen the relationship too, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm glad that you said that, because that's exactly what I was trying to get at, like the words. You have to build that trust. It is super important. The more they can trust you, the more they will give you responsibility to take over certain tasks. If you're finding a lot of resistance and the client is not willing to let you do some of this work, or, they're not getting things done, it could be a lack of trust, something in the relationship or the communication isn't working. And this is the client's way of telling you, like, I don't trust you with this work right now. And so that's super important to pay attention to and to try to build that trust with them, show them that you're on the same side. That's really what changed it for me. When I showed them that I was on the same side, they were able to trust me. We were able to build friendships. And because they liked me better, they were more willing to give me the things that I asked for, versus before when I was just, a stranger coming in trying to ask for things that I hadn't really built up the friendship and the relationship there. And so that's a very good point. You have to build a relationship, and you have to build a level of trust before you can start asking for things. I mean, obviously you need certain things to do your job, but you'll get better results for all of your requests if you have put in the foundation to build a friendship that goes beyond like just emailing when you need something done.
Yeah, and we're not saying that it's like a personal thing. It's nothing to do with you as a person. It's just the nature of it, isn't it? It's like you said, it's a stranger coming into the business, trying to offload some of that stress or one particular type of task the business owner can't do or the client can't do. And it's just naturally it will come with time, showing the client that you are capable and that you can be trusted. I think that's really all it boils down to, is just remembering that they're not some sort of, I think you've said it perfectly, I can't really add on to it, but you're not on opposite sides. You are working with the same goal in mind, really. And I think that another probably important point on top of that is that's why you should always try and work with clients whose work you care about. So, it might not be the exact kind of dream client that you want, but maybe it's in the industry that you like or the work you're super passionate about. And I think that goes a long way to kind of working together as a team. If you care about the work that you're doing, you're going to make more of an effort and the client will see that. And I think that's probably not, maybe in the beginning, if you're a new freelancer, that might not be realistic. But I think as a long-term goal, it's important to remember the kinds of clients that you want and kind of visualize that in your head about the ideal kind of people you want to be working for, because it just makes the work a lot easier on both parts, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I'm always trying to find like a backup client whenever I start to feel that work is getting a little dull with one client, and I know, like, I see the signs coming and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to start finding another client. And every time I do, like, I go through this and I try to make sure that I'm getting closer and closer to my ideal client every time. And, lately I've been working with some people that I absolutely love, and the work it's amazing. They are super supportive and super responsive. And it just goes to show those people are out there. You just have to find them. And then when you do, you appreciate them so much more, and then you will do so much better work for them.
We hope this episode has helped you figure out what to do next. Now it's your turn, Guava Bees. Have you got a burning question that only Guava Bean can help answer? Submit your question in the sandbox or on the website, and we could be answering yours in the next episode. That's all from us. To all creatives, rebels, and digital nomads, keep working online and living free.
Want to know more about the Freelancer Sandbox? Visit guavabean.com/sandbox to start your free trial now.